humans! And welcome! I'm Rock99 and today I'm back for you with my Metal Gear franchise review part 2. This one is going to be tough, so without wasting time, let's continue from where we left. As I anticipated in part 1, Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots was released in 2008 and had the new PlayStation 3 system at its disposal to implement a more realistic graphic with filters and colors that resembled those in war-themed movies and that allowed it to create a new, more modern gameplay. Indeed, for the first time, in addition to the usual stealth mechanics, there were over-the-shoulder aiming, walk while crouching, and entirely new ways for the player to make progress. The game takes place mostly in battlefield, full of AIs fighting each other, and the player can take advantage of the situation in different ways. They can exploit the general chaos to sneak around without being noticed, or they can participate in conflicts and make allies to receive support from NPCs. To be honest though, I didn't really like playing Guns of the Patriots. It doesn't really feel like a Metal Gear game. The gameplay is more suited for a shooter and favors action over stealth. Indeed, there are also a lot more scripted action sequences, more than in any of the previous games. And with Dreben's shop being always at the player's disposal, the concept of the procure on site was kinda lost, along with their encouragement to explore. Another thing that didn't convince me is that the gameplay compared to the narrative side feels more like an interlude between cutscenes that are so long to be almost like short movies. It doesn't really matter if you can go around with Mark II during the briefings, that doesn't really add anything to the story, it just gives some extras. Guns of the Patriots uses too much the cinematographic part of the game, relying too much on the cutscenes and consequentially making the gameplay feels less relevant. Metal Gear Solid, Sons of Liberty and Snake Eater make heavy use of cutscenes as well, but Guns of the Patriots doesn't have that story-gameplay balance. And that's one of the reasons why I personally liked the official novelization more than the game itself. I said I wouldn't have talked much about the other media of the franchise, but I think it is necessary to spend a few words on this one. Written by Satoshi Ito, also known as Project Ito, Metal Gear Solid Guns of the Patriots is the perfect example of an adaptation from video game to book. Not only tells the reader everything they needed to know to understand the events of Metal Gear Solid 4, but it also retraces the stories of previous games and of all the other relevant characters. It has entire paragraphs to describe their biography and their roles in Snake's story, and the novel is so well structured and well written that they connect perfectly with the story events without changing pace. I believe Guns of the Patriots plot works better on this format, even more than it could in a movie, because it dives deep into the characters' motivations, making it all even more coherent with the game's core theme being sense, as someone's true intentions and view of the world that can be misunderstood and lost, especially after they die. The novelization is more effective also because of how much attention is put on Snake's body that is slowly reaching its limits as he persists to fight. The book describes it as Snake proceeds in his missions with high levels of physical and mental pain, and as he remembers how even breathing was easier for him when his body was younger. And all of this is told from Otagon's perspective, so the reader can understand how the characters close to Snake feel when they see him in these conditions, and why they keep telling him to stop. I'm not saying that the game doesn't deal with this appropriately. Elements like the stress bar and the flashbacks are there to represent all of this, but books are indeed recognized as the best medium when it comes to explore and describe a character's psyche and thoughts. It is a privilege that books have, while audiovisuals are really limited in what they can do to represent them. A lot of video games make up for this with diaries and notes you can find around as collectibles. But Metal Gear Solid 4 left all of that mostly to the cutscenes. Maybe we can say that to represent the Snake's thoughts and emotion, the game relies on the player's nostalgia, with Snake going back to a decaying Shadow Moses, all the Easter eggs, and with the important characters of the franchise being introduced one by one. But I'd argue that you must have played the other games to fully reach that feeling and to understand Snake's mental state, and you definitely don't need to play the games to understand the novelization. I really recommend reading it. It's very well written, faithful to the game, faithful to the franchise, and also Kojima approved. But to make it clear, the game did its best to deal with the theme of sense, and just to make an example, the scene in which Snake is microwaved is as devastating in the game just as much as it is devastating in the book, with the Snake advancing despite his body collapsing and Otacon powerlessly looking at him as he knows that his friend must complete his mission. So it's not a matter of one is better than the other, it's just that video games and movies are much more limited than books when they have to talk about something abstract as someone's motives or will. With Solid Snake Journey completed, the franchise went back to tell the story of Big Boss, as he kept building his nation of free soldiers in the new entry of the franchise Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. Released in 2010 for PlayStation Portable and directed by Kojima, Peace Walker follows in Portable Ops' footsteps to redefine its gameplay and fully make use of the portable console. Not only it brings back the recruitment system, but it enhances it to truly make the player experience building and managing Big Boss's nation. Kidnapping soldiers became easier, since you can simply photo recovery them from anywhere, and I say literally from anywhere, then it crashes. And placing them in units will affect their gameplay even more. Leveling up your units will also result in building a bigger and bigger base, and the implemented reputation system will lead better skilled soldiers to voluntarily join. It all while the story missions bring back the Snake Eater stealth gameplay. Just as it was for Portable Ops, because of the console, here 2 missions are shorter and limited. Also for what matters the stealth actions you can perform.
I'll say that again! You cannot move while lying down! Is that clear?
But the player has now the possibility to move freely between stages and play in a variety of environments from jungles to military facilities. The biggest change though that makes the game different from the other entries of the franchise is that all the bosses here are not soldiers with special powers, but vehicles and machines controlled by AIs. These last bosses in particular, on the narrative side, bring the basis of one of the major antagonists in the Metal Gear lore, being the Patriots AIs. To tell the story, the comic-like cutscenes from Portable Ops are brought back, this time though with interactive sequences that in some occasions can either affect missions or your physical health. My arm can't anymore today! No! Help! And to replace the endless cutscenes, the game introduces the endless cassette tapes that also give information to prepare more effectively for each mission. Peace Walker is huge for a PlayStation Portable game, especially if we consider that among everything you can do and everything new you learn about the lore, there is also a deep reflection about a topic such as the theory of nuclear deterrence and the illusion of world peace. Personally, this is the Metal Gear game I enjoyed playing most. There are so many things to do and to discover, and with all the extras, the Easter eggs and Miller,
Cut it out, you're making me blush.
the fun never ends. However, because of the small console, a lot that was originally planned was actually cut out. The console was too limited for the gameplay and the story that Kojima had in mind. And indeed, we can now say that Peace Walker merely put the basis for the game that was supposed to be the very last Metal Gear game. This new project had to complete the lore and provide the players the ultimate stealth experience. Of course, I'm talking about Metal Gear Solid 5, and things here get complicated. This time, the limits that the game had to face were not related to the hardware or the technology, but they were restrictions imposed by the company that made the Metal Gear franchise possible in the first place, Konami. It is now known that Konami's vision for the future of its games started to be very different around the development of Metal Gear Solid 4. Indeed, after its release, Konami started to favor mobile games because they are faster and cheaper to develop, and the free-to-play formula proved to be more profitable and less risky than investing in the development of a big AAA game. So when the project for Metal Gear Solid 5 development went over budget, reaching more than $80 million of expenses, Kojima and his team were basically fired. They had their contracts changed, they were restricted on what they could do at work, and Kojima was even cut out of anything related to the game's promotion, although the company kept reassuring the fans that he would have worked on the project until it was completed. But I really have doubt about this honestly, because for as much as both Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain have one of the most complex, immersive, and spectacular gameplays ever, Metal Gear Solid 5 was released with an absurd amount of problems that the previous games never had, especially from a narrative point of view. The first issue came with the decision to divide the game's prologue from the rest. Ground Zeroes is the prologue of the Phantom Pain, and I'm sure it was never meant to be separated from the rest, as it starts like every other Metal Gear game, not spending that much time on the tutorial and putting the player right into action. However, they probably had to start getting back some of the money they spent for development, so they released the prologue as soon as they could. But this caused the Phantom Pain to have one of the most boring and annoying intros ever. And I say it as someone who had the chance to play the Phantom Pain right after finishing Ground Zeroes. I found a lot of posts and comments by players complaining about how long and boring it is, and I can't blame them. I'm sure that they had to make the intro longer than required because every game needs a tutorial at the beginning. It doesn't matter if you had played Ground Zeroes, developers can't just let for granted that all customers had played a demo before they released the finished game. Usually, finished game. You see, if only they released the Phantom Pain along with its prologue, the sequence at the hospital not only would have probably been shorter, because it didn't require a tutorial, but it would have also been a tool to change the game's pace. If you think about it, the tension rises from the start, as you are introduced to the villain, save Chico and Paz, and until you reach the burning mother base and the helicopter crashes. Then everything calms down for the player to assimilate everything that happened, while their character regains consciousness and is slowly introduced to the new situation. Then the tension rises again with the escape from the hospital chaos. You reach the climax while you ride away with Ocelot, and then the tension goes down again, as you finally reach the heart of the game, and by that time you're fully equipped with everything you needed to immerse yourself in this entirely new Metal Gear experience. Separating the prologue was a change that might have looked small, but it changed the experience of that sequence completely, and we are just at the beginning of the game's problems. You go through Chapter 1, you complete mission after mission, and you also learn something more about this new villain that is Skullface. Then you finally face him, he's defeated, but there's more. The ending of Chapter 1 tells you that it's not over yet, because there is still the threat of Cypher, the vocal cord parasite, and Eli who's causing trouble at Mother Base. But as soon as you begin Chapter 2, things start getting weird. If you had the feeling that the missions in Chapter 1 were repetitive, this feeling only gets stronger when you realize that in Chapter 2 almost all the missions you have to clear for the story to keep on going are some of those you have already cleared for Chapter 1. Exactly the same, with the same dialogues and cutscenes, but more difficult due to some condition that will make reaching the objective more challenging. And another annoying detail you notice is that missions that will actually tell you how the story continues can only be unlocked if you repeat and complete the difficult ones. In particular, if you don't meet a certain unknown requirements, you will not be able to unlock the mission that will actually reveal the truth around your own character and that connects everything with the very first Metal Gear game. Peace Walker had something similar. You could get its true ending by completing the extra missions, and by exploring the game sooner or later the secret ending there could be found. But for the Phantom Pain's case, strangely enough I found a lot of guides to unlock the truth mission, and all of them have different instructions. One said that even the emblems affect your chances of getting the mission or not. But as far as I know, I got the truth just by completing mission over important submission. In other words, the player not only is forced to go through the main missions again, but apparently this will not guarantee unlocking the secret ending to complete the franchise story. That's absurd. And to make it all even more frustrating, to learn this truth you have to repeat the entire intro at the hospital and follow the entire tutorial again. But aside from the fact that you get this true ending or not, the biggest problem comes when you realize that after Eli flies away with Redknock, Sahelanthropus and the English root of the vocal cord parasite, you will never know anything else about them in the game. Nothing. Unless you buy the collector edition of the Phantom Pain with the extra Blu-ray where there is the last mission with the proper conclusion to it all. And I wonder, where did they find the audacity to do this? It's like paying the ticket to watch a movie at the cinema and then they stop the movie before the end because you have to buy the DVD. And no, I don't care. It doesn't matter if Mission 51 is in that Blu-ray. It never made it to the final product, therefore is not canon, and consequentially, the well-constructed and coherent lore that made the Metal Gear games one of the best examples of storytelling in video games has an embarrassingly huge plot hole. Thank you, Konami! Don't mention it, give me your money now. Some argue that the game presenting itself like this is very coherent with the theme of the phantom pain, but I highly doubt that Kojima would have willingly left a plot hole in the Metal Gear lore. I can't believe that Psycho Mantis stayed by Eli's side until Shadow Moses, and I can imagine that they kept the Sahelanthropus for the purpose of building Metal Gear X. But do you really want me to believe that Liquid had the English root of the vocal cord parasite in his hands and he never used it? Really? Him? Mr. Give me what I want or I'll launch a nuke? A parasite that can spread fast, eats your lungs, and turns you into a zombie as you speak English sounds scarier than the prospect of exploding if you ask me. But seriously, there are so many other details that prove that the game is just unfinished, and that they just arranged what they had in the best possible way. Not to mention that past being an illusion and the part of the gameplay in Mission 51 being based on the fact that our character actually suffers the consequences of having a piece of metal stuck in his brain. I believe that there was more planned for the gameplay. Metal Gear Solid 5 undeniably has a gameplay that is really ahead of most of the games we have now, with mechanics allowing you to literally do anything that comes to your mind, and with it adapting to the player to match their abilities and encouraging them to try out different paths and approaches. But at the end, if you watch it as a whole, the Phantom Pain is just a collection of operations all similar to each other, with a villain that doesn't really have that much influence in anything you do. And about Skullface, he's probably the worst character of the entire franchise, for how wicked and cruel he is. But all he does in the game is sending something at you 2 or 3 times, and that's it. Skullface was a disappointment also because he does 2 monologues in the game and then he dies. Another detail that actually doesn't make that much sense in the franchise lore is brought by the newly introduced character of Quiet. More than once the game lets the player believe, although his name is never mentioned, that the End was able to reach such an old age because he too had the vocal cord parasites. Both Ocelot and Cold Talker in different occasions stress his similarities with Quiet conditions, informing us that they not only had enhanced human abilities when it came to sniping, but also that they can both breathe from their skin thanks to photosynthesis. So, with all of these similarities being pointed out by the game, and with this being one of the reasons Kojima talks about in his interview to justify Quiet's questionable design, why are the End, Code Talker, and all the other main characters affected by the vocal cord parasite fully clothed, while Quiet and the other female school snipers with the same parasite go around in a bikini? Aside from the fact that I think that something like Fortune's outfit could have worked the same and it looks 100 times better, there is really no reason given by the game that really justifies Quiet and school snipers being designed as they are, if not simply the fact that Metal Gear is a male-oriented franchise where female characters have constantly been treated differently from male characters. Now, despite the fact that the only female characters allowed to live by the end of Metal Gear Solid 4 are the 2 that got married, the one that slept her way to the top, and the super genius little girl who saved the world, and despite the fact that Quiet has been treated like something in between an animal and a stripper, with everything designed around their characters stressing this concept, from the way the camera shows her in cutscenes to her animations and her cage, which has no logical reason to be located here if not to be very quickly accessed by players when they arrive at the landing zone. Despite all of this, it is true that Metal Gear gave us probably one of the best representations of women in video games with the boss, representing love at its finest, for her own country and for the whole world, and making her sacrifice even more meaningful when she reveals that she gave up her motherhood for them. It is also true that all the women in the Metal Gear games are very strong, capable, independent, and that they saved the situation in many occasions and ultimately the world in Metal Gear Solid 4. But it's also true that there are a lot of details in the story, cutscenes, and actions the players can perform that prove that female characters are treated differently just because they happen to be female characters. And because any discussion I found on the matter of women in Metal Gear games have been shut down with "but Raiden was naked," I'll take a few minutes to show you how to properly read the infamous cutscene. Keep in mind that in audiovisuals, the tool to express the director's view is the camera and its movements. So when the camera focuses on something or moves in a certain way to show you something, to understand what the director is telling you, you have to ask yourself, why is the camera showing me this and why is it showing it in this way? Now let's analyze the cutscene. We start with the camera taking the role of Raiden's eyes, as a first-person shooter will do. In video games, this is the best way to completely identify the character with the player. Then the camera changes position and shows us the character that it made us identify with, and then it slowly moves up from his bare chest to his eyes. Usually, when the human body is at the center of the shot, it's because the viewer has to be made aware of a person's particular situation, for example, when they're about to die. In this case, the camera with its slow movements that end up showing Raiden opening his eyes is telling us that Raiden is getting aware of the situation, and with his bare chest exposed like this, along with his unusual stance, the camera is telling us that the character is extremely vulnerable. This shot alone also carries two more levels of meaning, as you remember that Snake was in this exact situation on Shadow Moses. And that's the first thing you hear when Raiden is shown bare-chested is Solidus saying,
This is my son.
An expression fathers may use the first time they see their newborn babies. So their camera is also telling you that this is the character's birth or rebirth. Then the camera shows us Solidus, who with his gesture leads the viewer attention on the eye patch on his left eye to stress his resemblance with Big Boss, and to strengthen the father-son relationship and the identification of Raiden and Snake. Then the camera changes view again and we see this. You are made aware that Raiden is completely naked, stressing even more the concept of vulnerability and birth, and the focus on the entire scene, not only on Raiden's naked body, is telling you that this situation is different from Snake's. In particular, the scene is structured in a way that the viewer's eyes fall on Ocelot's head, which is perfectly censoring Raiden's private parts. This is a way for the camera to make fun of the viewer, who was probably reminiscing and expecting the torture sequence in Metal Gear Solid. It's a shocking way to tell the player that things are different here and that Raiden has reborn as a new character. He's not Snake anymore. And the shock comes from how ridiculous this scene is and how uncomfortable it makes you feel. And it gets even more ridiculous with the camera that keeps drawing your attention there as the scene proceeds with the character discussing serious matters. Other examples of the camera teasing the player during a serious situation or dialogue can be found in other moments of the franchise, like for example here in Metal Gear Solid 4 or here in Metal Gear Rising. To put it simply, it's just the camera showing that it has the sense of humor of a minion. In none of these examples, as well in the entire franchise, the male body is used for fan service. I was joking about it here, but the camera cares so little about the male body that in this particular scene, where Snake's physical condition is the main topic, the camera that shows us his body is optional. I read comments referring to this kind of shots as fan service, but to make it clear, this is how fan service on male bodies looks like. When it's explicit, when it's a little more subtle, it looks like this. Put the scenes where the camera shows female and male bodies close to each other and you can see the difference. In the majority of cases, the cameras showing males are very dynamic, while the ones showing the females usually linger on their bodies. The only male character who's shown similarly is actually Vamp. But you can see how every time the camera shows him like this, he is wielding a knife, or he is ready to attack. The camera is not telling you, look how handsome this flamenco dancer is. No, the camera is actually telling you, careful, this guy is a beast, driven by his most primitive impulses. Okay, now that we're clear this, like I said more than once already in my streams, fan service around female anatomy doesn't bother me that much anymore, also because it's not like male anatomy is treated that differently lately in media. After all, it's simply cheap fan service as I call it, because it is the easiest and effortless way to please the viewers, and it is true for the gentlemen just as much as it is true for the ladies. The reason I talked about this topic is because in the Metal Gear games there are moments where players are given the possibility or even encouraged to do questionable actions for the sake of fan service, and this limits the game's playability as years go by and society changes. These moments can be alienating and even disturbing for almost half of the current gamers and potential new customers for re-releases, especially if we consider that while some can be coherent enough with the characters and the story, others could have never been there in the first place and nothing would have changed. Date with Paz and the White Room in the Beauty and Beast unit boss fights are examples of this. In Date with Paz, the goal is to get a minor-looking girl in the love box with Snake, and as if that wasn't enough, In this particular mission, the CQC control allows the player to sexually harass her. The game punishes the player if they do that, but it also allows them to do it at least 3 times before she calls Snake a creep and walks away. And in case you were wondering, no, that with Kaz is not comparable. First, because by the time you unlock his mission, you're sure that Miller is an adult. Second, because it's very likely to be there just to make you laugh. And third, because the CQC control actually makes you use a CQC. For both missions to be put on the same level, by using the CQC control, the player should do something like grabbing Kaz like Volgin grabbed Snake in Metal Gear Solid 3. Whatever the developers' intentions were with these missions, they just ended up proving that male and female characters are not treated the same. But the case with the Beauty and the Beast unit might even be worse, because if the intention with them was to make the player aware of war crimes by showing the consequences of trauma while making references to the theory of the wounded inner child, then the message has been very poorly executed. All the fan service around their bodies and the white room plays right after the audios that let you hear what the girls have been through make it look like the game is encouraging the player to sexualize them and to take advantage of traumatized war crime victims. Especially if we consider that when using the camera item in the white room, the characters will pose in suggestive ways for you. Considering that those who made this are also the ones who made an entire video game to warn us about how media can influence your mind and behavior, I highly doubt that they didn't know what they were doing here. What did Kojima try to say there? That trauma is sexy? So the point is, how can this kind of contents be re-released in a society and on a market that have changed while preserving the original intended gaming experience of the games? The answer is, they can't. And not only for new players, but also for long-time fans. And the discussion I found around the warning for outdated content at the start of any of the Metal Gear games included in the new Master Collection kinda proved me this. It might seem a little addition to indeed better fit current market and society, but for as much as it is just a line of text, the fact that you notice and it provoked any kind of reaction in you, it means that the game's playability and original experience has been altered. And it still will not prevent new players to potentially feel alienated. The Metal Gear games are great games. I personally enjoyed them a lot, but I really wonder how it was necessary for my view to be blocked by the body parts of the occasional female character.
We've got company. It's the Ocelot unit.
What?
Let's get out of here. Hurry.
Wasn't he looking
forget your
outside the window? Anyway, with this said, we are done with the 2 parts dedicated to the limits that affected and affect the Metal Gear games. I know this last part is a complicated topic to talk about, but I think it was necessary to address it. Also because I found posts of players that said that they couldn't approach the franchise because of how the women have been treated and portrayed in the games. And I feel so bad about it because I understand. But although I had to swallow a lot of that outdated content, it is true that I also had a lot of fun. And indeed, I would encourage to give them a try anyway, and you can criticize them in detail like I'm doing. And by the way, I don't think that women shouldn't be sexy in video games. At this point, I'm more like, just make the men sexier, and not like angry gorillas or toxic brats. So at this point, we have only 1 Metal Gear left among the ones that are considered canon: Metal Gear Rising, the first Metal Gear to be released for Xbox, and the sequel to Metal Gear Solid 4. And to think that the Guns of the Patriots needed a sequel already means that we're taking a wrong direction. But we'll see that together in the next part. For now, thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments what you think, if you agree or disagree with what I said, or if there's something in particular you'd like to mention. For more content, you can come see my live streams on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, and follow me on other socials, all the links are in the description. Thank you again, and see you next time with Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. Bye!
I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Come on!